Hi everybody. So this is me. You can't see me. You'll hear my disembodied voice, but that's okay. So this is chapter 2 in your text, Teacher, School, and Society for EDU 250. And I want to walk you through the manufacturer's, the publisher's PowerPoint, and I've augmented it a little bit, added a little bit to it, and just want to talk about some of these really important factors here in different ways of learning. Now, I know some of you are enrolled in EDU 387, and you'll be hearing this again in 387 in a little bit different format, but it's really important for us to recognize the diversity of learners in our classroom and what contributes to that diversity. We often think of it in terms of culture, socioeconomics, religion, race, but there's a lot of other factors that go into it, and these all come together to make a really interesting, heterogeneous, diverse group of students. So I'm going to take you through this PowerPoint a little bit, and then talk to you a little bit about multiple intelligences, and then sort of review what you're doing this week. Okay, so factors contributing to learning styles. The individual learning style, we all have individual learning styles. I mean, everyone has a preference for the way they would like to learn. It does not mean that we can't learn other ways, we just have a preference. And the multiple intelligence quiz survey will help us to understand our own personal learning styles. And so while I may be a visual learner, others may learn from reading, others may learn better from viewing, others may learn better from listening. Doesn't mean that we don't work on all of those learning styles, but we do have a preference. And so the factors that go into our learning styles has a lot to do with that as well. So we have affective factors, cognitive factors, and physiological factors. So I'm going to walk. So affective factors are those things that teachers find so frustrating. Motivation, attitude towards school and learning, the values and emotions that one brings with one to school, curiosity. Not having curiosity or not having it can be the key to student learning. Having the ability to tolerate and overcome frustration, and having this locus of control. I mean, we all know people who have these two different views. If you feel that this external something externally is controlling you, you won't take responsibility for it. It's always somebody else's fault or something else's fault. There's always some factor, so one doesn't take responsibility. But the internal locus of control says, I am the master of my own fate. I can control it. There are certain things that one can't control, but I can do my best to control who I am. So these affective factors are really important. A couple of years ago, the WPA, that's the Writing Program Administration, the National Writing Project, and the National Council of Teachers of English came together and created a document that looked at what was needed for post-secondary success in writing. And I would argue that some of the things they came up with are important for all content areas and all grade levels. And these are habits of mind. And these are the affective factors that I'm really looking at here. This ability to not procrastinate, to persevere, to be curious, to be motivated. So affective factors. And then we have cognitive factors. This is the way we process our information, how we prefer to learn. This is what I was referring to when I spoke of multiple intelligences. Reading, listening, tactile, being able to touch things, manipulatives, step by step. Some people really need that clear, lineal step-by-step instruction. Holistic, in other words, kind of looking at the whole picture and jumping in and then seeing how it all works together. Reflective, being able to step back and think reflectively about what one is doing or why one is doing it. Multitasking, doing several things at once. A concrete thinker and abstract thinker. Concrete thinkers tend to be very sort of lineal. Abstract thinkers tend to be, they look at many different things that might have something to do with the problem at hand. So cognitive factors. And then we have physiological factors. If you're not well rested and well fed, this is pretty obvious. You're not going to do well in a classroom. And then we have, and with the number of homeless students that we see in our classrooms today, or students who may as well be homeless, who don't have good caregivers. This is important. If you don't feel safe, if you're not being fed, if you're not sleeping well or have a place to sleep, doing well in a classroom may not be your priority. Although for some people, the classroom becomes the sort of the saving grace, the place where they know they can depend on someone, they know they're going to get something to eat, or they know that they are cared for. Then there are morning and afternoon people. I am definitely an afternoon person. Okay, while I can get up in the morning, I don't function well in the morning. I function much better, late morning, afternoon, and early evening. And so your preference, and schools start early, relatively early. For high school, even earlier than elementary school. Sitting and moving. Some people it's really hard to sit still. They need to be moving around. Classrooms don't always honor that. There are times when students need to be seated. Lighting, I prefer incandescent light. Other people, like it darker. They don't mind the fluorescent lights. Sound bothers some people. Some people are very distracted by sound. Others need like music to concentrate, or some white noise in the background. Temperature, what's comfortable for one person may be freezing for somebody else, or making somebody else overheated. So our bodies react differently to stimuli and to climate and to our environment. So, how do we create a productive learning climate? I mean, with all these diverse ways of thinking about how one learns. So the text pulled out some selected myths. Students need to learn best in quiet surroundings. We already know that some people need background noise under music. I personally like having soft music in the background while I'm working. Sometimes it's distracting, I need to shut it off, but for the most part it's very soothing to me, and it helps me to really focus on what I'm doing. Students learn best in well-lighted areas. Well, again, dimmer light may be better for some. When I taught in high school, I had incandescent light. I turned the overhead lights off because they gave a lot of people headaches, including myself. And we had, the more softer lighting. And there were times when I felt that we didn't have enough light, and I would go to click on the overhead lights, and students would be, oh, no, don't do that, it's too bright. And then those who needed more light would sit by the windows, or they would sit near a lamp. We managed to figure out a way so that everybody was comfortable. And so I invite you to think about some myths that you have heard about what is a productive learning climate. Another one would be everybody is seated in their place in straight rows. I think that is indeed a myth, because sometimes that may work and other times it may not. Look at us. We're not sitting straight in rows, and I hope that we're learning something. Okay, so teaching tips for different learning styles. Okay, so this is where we come into the multiple intelligences, and at the end I'm going to show you some of the multiple intelligence survey I took, just to give you an example of what that would look like. So for visual learners, what can we do for visual learners? We can use guided imagery and illustrations. We can create graphs or charts. And then I would invite you to think about things that would work for visual learners. Auditory learners, encourage students to study with a friend so they can talk through important concepts. Talking for auditory learners is really important. And unfortunately, in these online courses, we don't always have that. We have textual talk, which is okay, but actual talk is good too. And so I would encourage you, if you want to study with a friend, to utilize some of the great media we have today, like Skype and Google Hangout, or any of those, FaceTime if you have an iPhone, any of those things to talk through ideas and concepts. Creating a safe classroom and community where students feel welcome to ask questions. Again, we have a virtual community, but I hope that you feel that you can ask questions of me and others, and that we all respect one another. And this is something we want to encourage in our classrooms, whether it's a K classroom or it's a senior in high school. We have kinesthetic and tactile learners. These people need to feel and touch, and they need to move around. So using role plays to bring important concepts to life is a good way to do that. Encouraging students to underline or color code reading materials to help focus their attention. And again, I invite you to think about some of those other things. And then here we have the Gardner's multiple intelligences. Logical, mathematical, linguistic, bodily kinesthetic, musical, spatial, interpersonal, intrapersonal, naturalist, and then there's been some question about some of the other ones. Now, I don't have you in front of me to generate responses about what kind of design activities might work for here, but let me just give you a couple and see what you think. And then I would invite you, on your PowerPoint to add things that you feel might work. All right, so I'm going to see. We've got logical, mathematical. So what would be some things that we might do? Well, we might solve puzzles. Oops, hang on. I got to get my pen working here. Let's see. Hang on just a minute. There we go. So we might solve puzzles. That's not very, can't read that very well. And I'm writing sort of upside down here, so you'll have to excuse my handwriting. Linguistic, verbal linguistic. What might we do to have somebody? We might have them do journals. Okay, we might have them write in journals. All right. Bodily kinesthetic. Okay, these are people who are going to move around. So for them, field trips might work well. Getting outdoors. Musical. Okay, so we think about musical. What things could we do? Well, again, we could think about background music. I'm going to abbreviate that. Other things might be humming, rapping, all kinds of those sort of things. Playing instruments, singing. And then we have spatial, okay? So spatial, really is that visual looking. So you might use graphs, okay? Something else, you might do story mapping, you might illustrate, you might sketch. Intrapersonal. How might someone who's interpersonal be able to do that? Again, I think journal keeping would work for that one as well. Personal goal setting. Independent reading. Okay, so let's put independent reading. We'll put one up here. Again, apologize for my handwriting because it's really hard to write with this screen standing up. Then I'm sorry, I transposed those. This should be intrapersonal. Okay, now we'll do interpersonal. I'm sorry, I haven't got my glasses on. I really should. So interpersonal, really group work would work for that. Any kind of sharing of working together with people. Study groups, brainstorming. And then we have naturalist. Okay, so naturalist, they want to be outside. Okay, they want to be doing things that, so things like bird watching. Okay, if it pertains. Stargazing. Going on a nature walk, using a microscope, reading outside, and then we can add others as well. So that's just a little exercise, and you can do a Google search and find lots of lists of activities that emphasize each intelligence. Now that doesn't mean that we have to individualize every single student to his or her personal learning style. It means that we need to be aware of their personal learning style and help grow those other intelligences, and not just use the one. Okay. And so then on your text on page 41, there's this a quiz on emotional IQ. So emotional IQ. Sorry, let me get to the page here so I can actually look at it, because I ended up closing the book. I didn't mean to. So what's your EQ? And there are 5 questions there about knowing one's emotions, managing one's emotions, motivating oneself, recognizing emotions in others, and handling a relationship. I took the quiz, and I got a 16, and that's a B. So it says, you have considerable skills and talent. And I don't feel as though I always manage my emotions very well. I wear my heart on my sleeve, and if something upsets me, I cry, and I'm not ashamed of that. If something makes me happy, I cry, and I'm not ashamed of that either. So I'm not terribly good at the managing part. I am very good at motivating myself. I think I'm pretty good at recognizing emotions in others, and I'm pretty good at handling relationships. So I would invite you to take that quiz, and then to think about how that affects the students who you may have in your future class. All right, and then giftedness. Those of you who are in EDU 387, you'll be reading about gifted and talented students and how we accommodate that exceptionality. But for here in this general 250 course, I think it's important that we understand the characteristics of giftedness. And what does it mean to be a gifted student? Well, most gifted students are very creative thinking. Okay, they really have this original thinking. They can improvise. They can create. They have a sense of humor. And they have specific academic ability. They enjoy academic success in a particular area, and they're widely read in that area. And there may be some people who are particularly gifted in math science, some who are in the humanities, some in theater. And some may be gifted in more than one area. Gifted children generally have really, really high leadership qualities. They assume responsibility. They hold high expectations for all. They're well-liked. They demonstrate good judgment. And then general intellectual ability, they can usually, abstract thinking is not a problem. They can create new insights. They're a quick learner. They're observant. They're excited about new ideas, very inquisitive. Visual and performing arts, they're usually skilled at self-expression through many of these performing arts. And they're particularly skilled at spatial perception and coordination. So it's important for us to understand the characteristics of giftedness, but it's also important to understand that sometimes these characteristics are a liability for children because they do tend to stand out. And so many gifted children hide their giftedness because they don't want to appear different. So we have to be really cognizant of these characteristics and to foster them. And so here's a burning question for you. And this is a rhetorical question. I don't expect an answer right away. I'd like you to think about it. How do teachers develop an instructional plan that will be challenging, enlightening, and intriguing to students of different abilities and still maintain a sense of community within the classroom? It is the $10,000 question here, folks. It can be done, but it takes an awful lot of teacher acrobatics. And it's important for us to really understand what we need to be doing and knowing about our students in order to create this classroom. It doesn't come overnight, and it doesn't come in your first days or even years of teaching, but it is something that we need to strive for. And every year we need to reinvent ourselves because every year we have different students in our classroom. Okay, so here's an approach to teaching gifted students. For those of you, the high school people, advanced placement and international baccalaureate programs are usually reserved for gifted students. Now, there are advantages and disadvantages, and I would invite you to think about what those might be. Some advantages for the advanced placement in IB are that you get college credit. What are some of the disadvantages? It's test-driven. One must pass a test, and so teaching in those courses are often teaching to the test. Enrichment, individual projects, small group inquiry, academic competitions, learning centers, so enriching the general curriculum for gifted students. Advantages, it does give them a sense of agency and a sense that someone is recognizing that they need more than what's in the general curriculum. Disadvantages, again, I think it does sometimes single students out. Particularly, and sort of creates this divide between them and other students. Not always, but sometimes. And then acceleration. You could skip a grade, you could be dual enrolled, particularly in high school, you can be dual enrolled in college and high school classes. And so, here's another question for you. What will standardized based, this should be standards, not standardized. I miswrote that, so I'm going to actually correct myself on that. What is standards? Get my pen working. Standards-based learning and teaching mean for gifted and talented students? I'd like you to think about that in terms of what we have for learning standards. Will gifted and talented students achieve those standards early on and be bored? Will they need a different set of standards? Will they need to move beyond the base standards that we have? I don't have the answers to that, but I'd like you to think about it and think about it in terms of what does this mean for this particular population of students. And then we move on to special education. Okay, we talked about gifted and talented, which is kind of one end of exceptionalities, and then special needs students. And this brings into IDEA, which is the federal laws governing how students with special needs are treated. So, zero reject, that means that no child may be denied a free and appropriate public education, no matter what. Non-discriminating education, fairly assessed so to be protected from inappropriate classification and tracking. Appropriate education, right to education involving accurate diagnosis of needs with program to suit. This is the IEPs. Least restrictive environment, not inappropriately segregated. Procedural due process, the right to protest a school's decision about education. And the IEP, which is long-term goals, short-term goals, methods of evaluation, accommodations, and modifications. And those of you in EDU 387 will be hearing a lot more about this. But these are critical principles that you need to know going into a classroom. Everyone has the right to a free and appropriate public education, no matter what. Distribution of students served under IDEA. Okay, these are the special needs students. And you can see specific learning disabilities, above all, 41%. So it may be a cognitive, memory processing disability. It could be a verbal disability. Then we have speech and language, which is 22%. Mental retardation is a very small percent, actually. Emotional disturbance, another small percent. Developmental delay, even smaller. And autism, 2%. I think that's growing. I think we're going to see that figure go up. This is a 2007 table. I would suspect that it's higher than that now. Multiple disabilities, 2%. Hearing impairments, 1%. Orthopedic, 1%, and then others, 10%. I'm not sure what constitutes the others. It's a pretty large percentage just to lump all together. But it gives you a general idea of overall the kinds of special needs that you would see in a class. So accommodations for students with special needs: group work, hands-on, activity-based, adjusting the length and type of assignments. This is differentiation and modifications, individualizing instruction, IEP, carefully selecting materials or creating your own. Sometimes canned curricula doesn't work for special needs students, and we have to really think about what we're using. Present information multiple ways, orally and visually. For instance, right now I'm presenting you information visually, but I'm also talking about it. Use technology, which I'm doing. Not that you are special needs, but and some of these are just good practice for all students. Examine the classroom environment and use various forms of assessment. I think that last one's really important because it's easy to say, well, that person can't pass a test, so what do I do? Changing up the assessment will help. And then other accommodations, assistive technology, wheelchairs with voice commands for handicapped students, computer programs that read for the visually impaired, voice-activated software or specialized touch screens, Erica, which is eye gaze response interface computer aid, and then therapy animals. If you own a Mac, you can turn on your text read that'll read the text to you. And there's a lot of applications out there for iPads and for Androids that will do that as well. And I'll actually see if I can find a few of those and post them for you so you can take a look. And then I want to go back to multiple intelligences and help us think about what it means to have all these different intelligences. It used to be that you took a Stanford Binet test and it just said, okay, this is your IQ, and this is the way it is, and this is how smart you are. But we know that there's all kinds of different kinds of smart. Smart is a relative word for me. I'm looking for my paper here because this one, I know where it is. Sorry, I'm in my office and I've got things all over the place. So I took a multiple intelligence test, and I'm sorry that some of this didn't come through on here. I tried to shrink it down, and I shrunk it down too much. So when you take this survey, you're going to get the link I gave you may not be the same one I used here, but you'll get some kind of readout. So I'm just going to. This is 18% up here, which was number 5, and then this one, Word Smart, was 24%. So that's my number 1. Okay. So when I took this test, what I came up with, that I am predominantly linguistic, in other words, word smart. 24% of what the questions I answered led me this test to say that I am, you can see the piece of pie there, that I am word smart. And I would not disagree with that. I like words. I like reading. I like that. Number 2 was intrapersonal, okay? That means having the knowledge of one's feelings, needs, strengths, and weaknesses, and using this knowledge to guide behavior, okay? So this is how I feel about myself, okay? And my self-smart, and you can see that here. And so that has, that is number 2, okay? So I'm word smart, I'm myself smart, and then number 3 was picture smart. In other words, I'm 24% visual learner. So notice those percentage points aren't too far apart, 24, 22, and 22. In fact, interpersonal and visual spatial were the same. And then my 4th choice would be nature smart, 20% there. Okay, so I enjoy being able to classify things. I have a sensitivity to the world around me. And then 5 is this body smart, this kinesthetic, okay, which means that I'm physically, I can do things, physical things. I can handle objects skillfully. I'm a runner, so I guess that would be, one thing that would say that I'm body smart. I like to move around. I don't want to just sit all the time. And then the 6th one is number smart. And frankly, I thought that would have been the last one because even though I say I'm not a good math person, I really am. I just don't use it that much. But I would prefer not to learn, that way. But nonetheless, it happens. So logical means that, mathematical manipulations and discerning and solving logical problems. I'm a good problem solver. May not be good at, mathematical computations and problems, but I'm a really good problem solver. So that's probably why it ranked higher than I thought it would. And then people smart, interpersonal. Okay, so that means that what it means is I'm happier with myself than other people, and which seems sort of strange for a teacher. I love students and I love being with them, and I would rather stand up in a hall and give a lecture to 500 people than to mingle at a party with a lot of people. If that makes sense to you at all. So interpersonal. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with learning with people, but my preference is to learn by myself, to be alone by myself, to really think about things. But I can, of course, work with other people. And then the last one is musical, which is no clue to me. I can play the piano barely, and I can't carry a tune in a basket. So, I am not, I don't produce pitch and rhythm. I just don't. I like music. I like listening to music, but I'm not good at producing music. So that's my, multiple intelligence. And so I know the way I learn the best, but I also know that I have to work on the other ones as well. So I can learn in all of these situations, but I'm sort of in my zone when I have words and I'm by myself, teaching myself. So, okay. All right, so that's it for just kind of an overview of diverse classrooms and thinking about, the factors that go into the diversity, multiple intelligence. And so for this week, what I'm asking you to do is to read Chapter 2, and you have a copy of the PowerPoint, so if you wanted to print that out and take notes on it, that's fine. And then I want you to take a multiple intelligence survey, and I give you the link there. And so go to that, and then we go to the discussion forum and discuss your findings. Are you surprised? Tell us what give us the ranking, 1 through 8, and is it pretty much what you thought? Just discuss it and share your findings with others. So I'm asking you to be interpersonal here. And then I've given you a couple of videos about bias, okay? Because one of the things that we have to be careful about in our diverse classrooms is bias, and sometimes bias isn't always apparent. And so there's 2 videos. One is 8 minutes and one's 12 minutes. I'd like you to watch them, and then identify the biases you observed, and how can these biases be avoided. I'd like you to discuss that in the open discussion forum too. So you have 2 discussion forums for this week. Now you don't have to address every single bias you observe. Maybe pick 1 or 2 that seemed really standing out to you, and then discuss those. And then hopefully some of your peers will have different viewpoints, and you can sort of talk about, what you can do to avoid these biases. So I think that's it for this week, folks. This video went on for a little bit longer than I intended to, but nonetheless, some people learn from lecture and some people don't. So, hopefully you've got a nice mix here from what I have to say about the chapter and what you read and what you have to bring to the discussion forum. So with that, I'm going to say goodbye and wish you a good week.